Hey guys, Mr. Kaz here, and today we're going to talk a little bit about contextualization and what it means. So, contextualization is the historical skill of determining how events happening at the time a source was created affected the content of that source. So, if it's a piece of artwork or a cartoon, what was happening that led to that being created in such a way? If it's a document or speech, what was going on in the world, in the country, in the city at that time and place that would have influenced the author or the creator of the source to use certain words and certain vocabulary and certain devices while they were writing that source. So we first have to look at the big C. When we say the big C, we're talking about the big C context of areas of the country and the world. So what was going on in that country as a whole, or in that entire world or even region of that world, of the world, that could explain why the author used certain vocabulary words or why the author wrote that source to begin with. All right, when we're talking about time, we're talking in more of years and decades, right? So we're saying what's going on in that 10-year period, that 20-year period, that 30-year period that could influence that author, that person who created the source. The second one we're going to talk about is little c context. And this one we're talking about the area of a local, like a little town or a city or the state or even the region of that country. And as in regards to the time, we're talking about days, weeks, and months in this instance. So, was there something that happened? Was there a great tragedy or event or protest that happened in the days or weeks leading up to that source being created? Okay, and that's going to give you insight into how and why that source was created to begin with. So, I'm going to use the example of a letter from a Birmingham jail written by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, we're going to look at the big C and the little c of the context that goes into the creation of this source. So in regards to the little c context, we know already that the city of Birmingham in Alabama, the state of Alabama, and the South as a whole were known for poor treatment of African Americans during this time period. Okay, but this is little c, so we're talking about around early 1960s. Okay, there was quite a few bombings of black churches and homes in Birmingham, so much so that it was actually called Bombingham. And police used attack dogs, tear gas, and fire hoses on anyone protesting for equality for black people. Okay, this is what's happening in the little c. All right, this is in the very local area of Birmingham, Alabama, and Alabama as a whole. Now, going to the big C context, because there's a bigger picture, many African Americans were demanding equal treatment throughout the U.S. That would be our countrywide big C. Furthermore, there was a struggle called the Cold War that was happening between the United States and the Soviet Union, and that was fought over control of the world. And it was fought from the late 1940s to the 1980s. And the Soviets pointed to racial inequality in the U.S. to kind of poke fun at us and say, look, they're not so great after all. They claim to love democracy and liberty, and yet they're not giving it to a certain group of their population. And you can see the picture on the right in this slide is a Soviet propaganda poster showing it looks like a deceased African American man in a pool of blood, and that looks like a backdrop of one of the American cities, most likely New York City. So that's the big C going on. That's the big C context. Now, putting it all together in this chart, big C, little c chart, okay? Anything on the outside circle of the chart is going to be big C context. Anything on the middle is going to be little c context. So you can see here some things that were going on big C in country, world, years, decades. There were many people, many persecuted people across the world using the Cold War to win new rights. These people who were used to being treated very poorly are saying, if you want to have us align ourselves with your group, your country, the United States or the Soviet Union, you're going to have to give us some more rights. And so this was being utilized by a lot of people, not just in the U.S., but all over the world. Secondly, African Americans across the U.S. were fighting for equal treatment in the 1950s and 60s. So we're talking a decades-long struggle. All right, and if you want, you can even go as far back as the end of slavery, when black people were promised certain rights and they were really never given them, unfortunately. Nextly, black people were mistreated by whites going all the way back to the time they were enslaved. So we could go all the way back to the 1600s. And that would be that big C context, that years, decades, even centuries. And then finally, the Brown versus Board of Ed ruling in 1954 gave a lot of black people hope of gaining more rights. And so this letter was written in 1962 or 1963, around that time. And we can go all the way back to the Brown versus Board of Ed ruling in 1954 to see that this movement has been gaining steam over time. Now going to the little c in the middle, some things that were happening in Birmingham and that area. There was bombings of black churches and homes in Birmingham. And finally, police were using attack dogs, tear gas, and fire hoses on protesters. This is what was happening in that immediate area, that little c, in the days, weeks, and months of when this letter was written. And in this area, the direct area where the letter was written. So let's see. Next up, we have a political cartoon. This was actually created by Dr. Seuss, and it was during World War II. And you can see here some observations about it. He's obviously making Japanese people look very bad. You can see the one gentleman in the booth is giving out TNT. The Japanese people all here kind of look the same, that stereotypical slanted eye kind of look, very racist. You can see one guy's on the top of the building spying or sending messages back home to Japan, maybe. We're really not sure. And then you could see Washington in the background, Oregon and California. So obviously this is happening on the West Coast. Okay, so for a little bit of context, first we're going to start with the big C context. So we know that Japanese military expansion was happening in Asia, and that was very worrisome for a lot of Americans. Okay, secondly, Japan creating a military alliance with Germany certainly made a lot of Americans worried about the Japanese. Could they be trusted? And now going on to the little c context would be the Pearl Harbor attack, which happened before this was created. This cartoon was in response to, in a lot of ways, that Pearl Harbor attack. Okay. Nextly, we have fear of Japanese spies and saboteurs, right? A lot of Americans were fearful that Japanese would either, attack military bases or businesses or companies or people, and they would spy and give that information back to the Japanese. Then we have a desire to send Japanese living on the West Coast to internment camps. And this kind of cartoon all fed into that context that was going on, this fear of the Japanese. So knowing all of these things, knowing the big C context and knowing the little c context, we can kind of get some insight into the creator of this source and what he was thinking as he was creating it. Most people think of Dr. Seuss for his kid-friendly cartoons. This happened to be something that was a little bit racist and a little bit darker. Looking back on it now. But at the time, looking at the big C and looking at the little c, we can kind of understand a little bit of what he was going through. I mean, the object is not to judge the author or the creator of this source. It's to understand what was going on that would cause this person to make this source. And that's all I really have for contextualization. It takes quite a bit of practice to get used to it, and we're going to do that a lot this year. But this is a great introduction, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and ask.